And now, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman has denounced a remark by the UK on the country's use of ballistic missiles during a military drill in the Persian Gulf. Saeed Khatibzadeh rejected what he called the UK's meddlesome stance on Iran's defensive capabilities. He said it is the insatiable appetite of Britain and other European countries to create instability in the region by selling arms to some countries. He also held the UK accountable for the humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen, saying these countries are fully aware of their violations of international law by their arms sales. Khatibzadeh noted Iran acts within the framework of international laws and regulations and in accordance with its defensive needs. Reactions came after London said that Tehran's use of ballistic missiles during drills posed a threat to regional and international security and was in breach of UN Security Council resolution. And now joining us for this news review program is Robert Fantina, author and journalist, joining us from Kitchener, Ontario. Hello, Mr. Fantina. Hope you're safe and doing well out there. Your thoughts on so many countries worried about Iran producing missiles, storing missiles, conducting drills with those missiles, when they're pouring missiles themselves everywhere throughout the Middle East?
Yes, there's a lot of hypocrisy, major hypocrisy in this, not only by the UK but by other nations as well. The government of Iran has every right to and responsibility to have the necessary weaponry to defend its people from invasion and attack. And right now it is being threatened with invasion and attack by both the United States and Israel. They're both saying that they're going to, there are other options on the table, as they put it, if Iran doesn't reduce its nuclear enrichment to the levels agreed to by the JCPOA, which the United States and several European signatories have violated. They violated that agreement, and once it was violated by them, the agreement was null and void. So Iran is within its rights to enrich the nuclear enrichment to the degree that it is doing now, and certainly by testing anti-ballistic missiles, it's again not only indicating to the people of Iran that it's able to defend them, but it's indicating to the rest of the world that an invasion or attack on Iran will not be something that will go unresponded to in a very severe way.
Thank you, Robert. Pleasure for that initial remark. Tony Gosling, I'd like to welcome you to the program here. I hope you're safe and doing well out there in Bristol. Now, Tony, it's very ironic that the UK is slamming someone for practicing using its missiles while it itself and its cohorts are pouring missiles into the region that are being used to kill, not practice, but kill women and children in Yemen.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's rank hypocrisy, and we're speaking just as the UK comes into the first hour of Christmas Day, the celebration of the birth of the Prince of Peace. And at the same time, the British government is actually making war. What they're doing is they're preparing for war, and they're making war more likely, which gives you an idea about the sort of Tony Blair, George Bush attitude to Christianity that the establishment has in the West, particularly in Britain and the United States. And I'm sure most people in the Middle East are aware of that. Many people in the world are aware of that. But it seems that the Western press are not aware of that, because the overtures and the analysis from other parts of the world is being blocked. We've even seen today the Germans blocking RT Germany to stop the information from around the world getting to the Western public minds. You know, they're being absolutely bamboozled right across the Western world. And on such an important day, it should be the absolute opposite. But you're quite right about the Iran nuclear deal and the pressure on that. What we've seen today with this questioning of the Iranians' right to test their ballistic missiles. Now, look, the Iranians are testing these not for an offensive role, but for a defensive role. Iran is under massive pressure from the rest of the world, surrounded by the United States and other people, and that's why they're having to test these missiles, which would then be able to strike back at countries like Israel, were they to launch an attack on Iran. Absolutely crucial weapons to have, and it really does take the biscuit having the British Foreign Office talking in this way about the use of these ballistic missiles. But one of the things I'd like your viewers to understand is that much of British foreign policy is not made in the Foreign Office anymore. It's made somewhere called St James's Square in central London, a place called Chatham House, which is basically a privatised version, a private business club, which is immense amount of pressure on British foreign policy. And so even looking at the budgets of Chatham House compared to the Foreign Office, it's minuscule, but it punches well above its weight. And so that's where much of this is coming from, commercial pressure, and not actually elected government policy here in Britain.
And Robert, that's the thing. To Tony's point, I'm glad you mentioned Tel Aviv. When time and again it's made threats, military threats against Iran. It's even went as far as to say recently that it doesn't matter what happens in Vienna. If there's an accord reached or not, if the U.S. rejoins the JCPOA or not, we may still hit Iran's nuclear installations. So you tell me, I mean, what is Iran to do other than get itself defensively ready and prepared?
That's exactly what it must do, and that's what the government is doing. They're preparing to deal with these threats from Israel and from the United States, preparing to defend their people and showing their own people and the rest of the world they can and will do so. And to just refer back to a point you made earlier, the fact that the UK is saying that Iran is responsible for regional international security is just the height of hypocrisy. By selling weaponry around the world that's going to kill innocent men, women, and children in Yemen, in other places, it's this weapon sales, among other things, that is threatening regional peace and security throughout the Middle East. And it is not one nation in the Middle East preparing to defend itself. It is those other nations that are threatening it or that are providing weaponry to nations that are to war-making nations. But the government of Iran is doing exactly what it has every right and every responsibility to do by preparing to protect its citizens and its residents from an attack from a foreign nation.
And then we just find out recently, Tony, that Riyadh has a clandestine ballistic missile factory, basically, where they're in the process of building their own ballistic missiles, and that's another, Tehran adversary. And even the U.S. said that if the talks fail with respect to reviving the JCPOA, we're going to look at other options. Basically, everything leads to Iran at this point really stepping up its game and getting as sophisticated as it can with respect to its defensive capabilities.
Well, I mean, there's some that would say that ballistic missiles are used for offensive. I don't see the threats coming from Iran. I see them coming from other nations like the Israelis. And let's not forget that the Israelis do have nuclear weapons. And so there could be nuclear weapons on any incoming ballistic missiles coming in from the Israelis. Look, I'm quite certain that there has been a very long-term plan to create this tension that's going on now in the Middle East. The object is to create a world, effectively could become a World War III by drawing the United States into a supposed threat against the existence of Israel. And this, of course, is potentially devastating for the world, and that's what I'd like to warn against in 2022, is this kind of escalation, because that's why it's so important that the countries like Iran cannot be bullied by the West, because many countries who are non-aligned countries have been bullied in the past, and they've seen what's happened. It's a kind of McDonaldization of that nation, where those big American corporations, mainly transnational companies, come in and start to dominate the entire nation, dominate the political parties, dominate the media in those countries, countries, and those countries lose their cultural identity and they lose their ability to stand up as independent nations. And I'm very pleased that many countries, including obviously Iran and Russia and others, have managed to stand up against that. And it's very important that we have these independent countries in the world. The last thing in the world we want to do is be dominated by the United States, that seems to be turning itself, in foreign policy terms anyway, into the latest incarnation of the Nazi Reich. The Nazis that felt that they could just walk in any country in Europe that they felt like it. The United States has been behaving in the same way in the last 20 years or so. Since I've been a journalist, I've seen many attacks and invasions of countries that the United States has got no right to be in at all. And that's what I would warn against, is a long-term plan to create religious wars in the Middle East to draw other countries in. And that's what's really, I think, behind this sort of move by the British. And let me tell you, most British people don't agree with this at all. This is a small, very, very well-funded and vocal tiny minority of people in Britain that are saying this, but they have, I'm afraid, the levers of power in many ways, and certainly access to most of the media in the Western world. And you know, as we've seen with so many things, the media sometimes believes too much of its own propaganda. So let's hope that this never comes to pass.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both. Time has gotten the better of us. It's always a pleasure to have you both on the program. Tony Gosling there joining us from Bristol, and Robert Fantina joining us from Kitchener, Ontario. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.